Good evening. It is Christopher Inoma Mojade. I welcome you to another edition of Conversations with the CEO. I am looking forward to today's conversation. Conversations with the CEO is a series of conversations that we're having with thought leaders, industry experts, and individuals who help us, gain further perspective, gain further knowledge in three subject areas: in the areas of leadership, in the areas of relationship, and in the areas of finance. I have been privileged in the last couple of weeks to host a number of top globally rated leaders, and tonight is no exception. I am having my brother, my friend, the man, the legend, is called the Mind Guy, Bankole Williams, and I can't wait to have him on this conversation. And we're going to be speaking to the role of the mind in winning over persons of influence. So who better to have on the call than the Mind Guy himself, Bankole Williams, and we're going to share perspectives as we usually do. And I really can't wait to be blown away. So I hope you've all had a good day. I hope you're enjoying your day. I hope your week has been amazing. Whatever part of the world that you're dialing in from, or whatever part of the world that you're going to be watching the subsequent replay on YouTube or the platforms, I greet you and I say a very big welcome. So we're just going to give it a few more minutes, and we're going to get sure that we get the request to add Mr. Bankole Williams to the call, and hopefully a number of our other followers and would also know that we are live, so that they can join us for this conversation. It promises to be special. I kept on teasing Mr. Bankole Williams that I have my notepad and my pen so that I can equally take notes as well. So I'm just going to wait for him to send the request, and we'll get the show on the road. As I usually say, it doesn't matter if there's one or a million. All that matters is the audience of one. So I'm just going to wait and get the requests. And oh, yes, sir. The Mind Guy. I'm good, dude. First things first, sir. I am not happy with you. So let's put it out there. I'm not happy with you.
Tell me how.
You travel the world. You don't bother to, I don't know, you don't care about my feelings. I send requests to you. You ignore them till you get back from your trip. I hope after this call you will repent from that, Mr. Williams. I hope after this call you repent.
I already repented a long time ago now.
Good to have you, my brother. The Lord bless you. Thank you for honoring me. I don't take it for granted. So, because of the limited time of the report, they said that's how you do. Can you see, sir? See that man that is called? They said that's how you do.
Forget who is that? Who is that? Who's talking? Triple A. Forget that guy.
So, what we've been doing is this: we've been having a series of conversations that are the backdrop of the 5 books that I've written. 3 of those books go to speak to leadership. One of those books gets to speak to influence and relationship, while the third one goes to speak about depth. When I was with the team preparing the roll call of individuals who will honor me on this platform, it was a no-brainer that in between that shadow that you are going to pop up to speak to us as regards how to win over people of influence. Why? What you represent is a very tangible, and I would like to put it this way, not very common in this side of the world, science-backed steps that you help people be able to shake off stagnation, shake off faulty algorithms. So it is good to. I'm sorry about that. Technology happened.
Yeah.
So my first question, Mr. Bankole Williams, the Mind Guy, you are well known to be an individual who uses science-backed steps to help individuals shake up stagnancy and move forward. Now, I want to ask you, how powerful, or what's the role of the mind when it comes to relationships in general?
Okay, first things first. Thank you for having me. I think that it's so commendable to be able to translate your ideas and thoughts and put them on paper and document them in a way that other people can have access to them. But I also think that what is even critical or primarily important is the fact that, generations to come will benefit. I was still watching a video of somebody who has passed, God knows how long ago. And I'm like, what a privilege to still be able to have access, to the materials that people have documented. So well done, brother.
Thank
right.
you.
So you are welcome. Right. So to your question, the role of the mind, right. I ask people, who are you? I ask people, what does it mean when you say you are a human being? I ask people, what exactly are you? We all universally accept and acknowledge that we're not this physical body. So it then means that there is more to me than meets the eye. So if there's more to me than meets the eye, then what makes up me? What are the universal components that make us human, right? So I personally believe that we as human beings are consciousness that engages in thoughts, that engages in emotions. So what invariably that means is that a very critical and very fundamental component of our lives or of us is our minds, right? Our minds play a very, very important role in determining the fabric of who we are in this world. Now, when relating with people, then it then means that we need to understand the vehicle that we use to be able to engage in relationships and in our different interactions. And before you articulate your thoughts, before you speak, right, there is already a conversation that's happening internally. So it determines the perception that you have of people. It determines the vibe that you give off. That also determines the connections that you have with people, right? So, maybe back in the day when you used to be, I don't know if that ever happened to you, maybe when you used to be shy, right? You would, in your mind, have visualized the worst case scenario of what could happen if you reached out to somebody, right? And then people get frozen in time, frozen in that experience in their minds. And that ultimately determines how their body reacts, right? So they then start to give off certain mannerisms that match the thoughts in their minds. And it's very unconscious, right? So for instance, if you're afraid, you might notice that you have sweaty palms without you even knowing you are jittery. Now, all that is giving a message, right? Is subtly communicating to people. So it shows in the tonality of your voice. It shows in your body language what is happening in the mind. Now, the subconscious mind of every human being and their bodies are one, right? There is no distinction between the subconscious mind and the body. So once an information has been lodged in the subconscious mind, so maybe an information of fear, the body has to express what has been impressed. Now, when the body expresses that, it expresses, so for instance, somebody who is afraid, it expresses that with a mannerism that matches what is going on in the mind. Now, that mannerism gives off a vibe. We give off some kind of energy. So when you feel a sensation, emotions are human energy in motion. So when you feel an emotion, we think that it is just internal. No, our emotions are a broadcast, right? We are transmitting a signal out to this universe that we may not see but can be felt. Let me ask you, Chris, have you ever entered a room where, an argument had just happened? You weren't there when they were arguing, but you entered the room and you could feel that something had happened, right? You could sense it. So it didn't have anything to do with what was being verbalized, the words, nothing. It's that there was energy in the room. Now, the mind plays a role in the translating of thoughts into energy, into emotions. Now, those emotions give off a vibe. So people will say things like, that guy has good vibes. People will say things like, that guy has bad vibes. What are we talking about? It's communication in terms of energy that's being given off. And ultimately that determines whether the person who you're trying to relate to finds you likable, right? Feels like they can click or connect with you, feels like you are warm, or you create a nice environment for them to be able to connect with, right? So the mind plays an extremely fundamental role in determining the kinds of relationships that we have.
Oh, so you've laid a perfect foundation, and because you and I obviously speak and teach on emotional intelligence to a large degree, for those who do not understand the entire, I like to call it the galaxy of emotional intelligence, because you find out that it is so multifaceted in diverse ways. You spoke to how our thoughts translate to feelings, and that obviously ends up in the actions that we show. So we are both on the same page, and everyone listening understands now that the mind is the very foundation of everything. I love what you said. You said we're expressing what has been impressed. So I want to pick up the key word on impressed. Now, my brother, we live in a heavily charged world where there is so much signals being tossed left, right, and center. And whether consciously or subconsciously, so much is being impressed on us. Now, a lot of people do not understand the power of this, and they find themselves in a state or a rut where they are confused, but they don't understand how, more or less, the world has played a role in how can you take charge of your mind in the kind of world that you and I live in. We live in a world that, my brother, walkie-talkies are killing people, pages are killing people. That's
Yeah.
enough said. So how do you control what is being impressed on you?
Well, such a beautiful question. I think that more than ever before, there seems to be a lot of toxicity in the world. And what we don't realize is that we are all contributors to this universal pool of energy that ultimately is impacting us, right? And we all contribute. Remember what I said about emotions. We think that emotions are just feelings that we experience internally. But what we don't realize is that we're sending signals. So that means we are contributors to an eternal fertile pool, right, that we all can ultimately become victims of. Now, how does one, rise above this? Now, in a time like this, it is imperative that we become knowledgeable about the tools that are necessary for us to be emotionally intelligent and for us to be able to regulate our emotions. Now, one of the first things I tell people is that if you are not the creator of your future, if you don't start your day by predetermining how you will think and feel, right, you will become a victim of situations and circumstances. If you do not start your day with a design of what the future is going to look like, you will default into the repository of your past. Now, what does this simply mean? If you don't have a practice for showing up greater than the circumstances in your environment, you will end up being victimized by the circumstances in the environment. So because it's like recognizing that this is what I can potentially face because that's what seems to be prevalent in the world. Now, once I know that, I have to have a strategy for ensuring that I can show up greater than what is out there. Right now, one of the practices for me, now there are several other practices that helps me show up greater than what is out there is the practice of meditating. And when I say meditating, for me, it is being able to close my eyes and predetermine how I will show up in the course of my day. Now, what if everyone woke up every day and in their mind's eyes predetermined the kinds of thoughts that they will think when certain circumstances and situations showed up? What if they predetermined and they said, if this kind of scenario shows up, this is how I am going to react, choosing a response to a potential event, asking themselves, how would greatness show up to life today? Right? How would greatness talk? How would greatness walk? When people are agonizing about the circumstances and situation in the country, how would greatness contribute to that conversation, right? And making that selection before you get out of bed. But the problem is we don't realize that we're defaulting to our defaults, right? And most people start their days thinking about the problems of yesterday. That's what the average person does. Now, if your thoughts impact on your results and you are consistently thinking yesterday's thoughts, then what results are you going to be producing? You are going to be producing yesterday's results, right? So choosing to create an internal environment that is greater than the external environment is definitely one way to rise above, all the negativity that we find around.
I'm loving all that I'm hearing. I feel like a kid in the candy store. I just want to grab all the chocolates, and I know that I'm not going to get a tummy upset when I'm done. Why? The Latin phrase "carpe diem," which goes to seize the day. A lot of people do not understand the depth of what that word really represents. And in seizing the day, they think it's really all about creating a to-do list. And I like the fact that you touched on meditation. Unfortunately, because of a lack of religious, well, not them just say, but a lack of knowledge depths in this side of the world. When you use the word meditation, people think New Age, people think so much, forgetting the fact that even the Bible itself and virtually almost every religion speaks to the fact that meditation really is a key, because it is at that point in time that you are one with yourself, and like an architect, you can create your future. Love it, love it, love it. Now, I want to switch it up a bit towards men. When I wrote the book about gatekeepers, what I visualized in my head, because I've been asked severally, how are you able to speak to this person of influence? How are you able to get this access? How are you able to get along with people? In fact, this morning I was in bed with my wife when we woke up, and she saw me replying the message to someone. And whilst replying the message, I showed her the person's kids, and she said, what time did you meet him and you are chatting like this? How do how do you do it? Like it's I could see the look over her face. Now, can you help a lot of people who are joining this call and who find themselves, because you and I, Bankole, we know that you cannot fulfill destiny, you cannot make the most of life if you don't get along with people. It's impossible. You need men. And people are struggling in dealing with those persons. Now tell me, how can you, being the mind guy, be able to, should I say, short circuit the mind, work it out such a way that the mind aids and doesn't sabotage what you feel in winning men over and winning people over?
Fantastic. Right. So let me use an analogy that would simplify this thing for people to understand. I like to make complex things simple, right? Let me use the analogy of a car, right? Or driving, for instance. Now, Chris, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. Have you ever driven a trailer before?
If I say yes, my wife might be on this call and ask me when we are done. If that was on your CD when I married you.
Yeah. Okay, maybe you haven't, but I'm sure you have an idea what that experience is like, right? Driving a trailer.
I can visualize that.
You can visualize that. Right? Now, let's say you wanted to make a U-turn with a trailer, right? What do you think that experience is going to be like? Considering how narrow Lagos roads are.
I will be cursed. I will be abused. I will be tortured and scarred after that experience.
It would be tough, right? Trying to make a U-turn of the trailer, you have to, take like the outer arc, and you have to start preparing to make the U-turn before you get to the turn, right? It seems like a lot of work, right, to make a U-turn. Now, let me ask you a different question. If you wanted to make a U-turn with a Kia Picanto, what do you think that is? One time. You don't need to think or analyze.
I will flip it for one hand.
You make the U-turn. Now, the question I ask people, and for everybody who's on this call, is if human beings are like cars, what is the takeout from these scenarios that I just played out? If human beings are like cars, right, what can you learn from knowing how to navigate with a trailer and knowing how to navigate with a small car. In very simple terms, when I ask these questions, people always say to me, you don't drive people the same way, right? You drive them according to their configuration. You don't drive people according to your preferred style. You drive them according to their preferred style, especially when you want to be able to smoothly navigate them in a chosen direction, right? So I meet people who say to me, Bankole, this is how I am. My type of person, I'm the shy type. I don't used to talk much, right? And I say to them, if God gave you a mouth, what did He give you a mouth for? And then I say, He gave me a mouth to talk. I said, no, it's to eat. The only reason. So the reason you have a mouth is because the capacity to articulate your thoughts with another and build a relationship and some measure of influence with them, you possess. So what then we now need to work on is the necessary adjustments you need to make when you see certain kinds of people so that you can get the best out of relating with them. So you don't drive people according to just your own preferred style. You drive them according to their configuration. What does that mean? It then means that you have to be observant, right? One of the keys to connection is observation. I'll take that again. I said one of the keys to connection is observation, that you can be observant enough to see what you need to do or say to establish a connection with that person. The problem is that people go into conversations without observation, right? Without taking note to see what is value to this person, right? Without taking note to see, what is this person like? What is going to win the heart of this person? The formula is to win the heart of the person and then establish a connection. What is common ground that we can establish, right? There's a principle of rapport, and rapport is when you find a strong connection with somebody. For those who are listening, have you ever met somebody and when you met the person, you just felt like you had known them all your life? Right? Now, the reason that happens is because you established a rapport with them. The question is, what made you establish a rapport with them? It's common ground. You found out you went to the same primary school, the same secondary school, you go to the same church or something. You find a lot of connections with them, and all of a sudden the person opens up. In the presence of rapport, anything is possible. So a smart person who wants to connect with people looks for common ground to establish a connection, looks for what the person perceives as value, and uses those things to establish a connection, right? There are certain things that are universal. There are certain things that are personal. I've spoken about the personal ones, meaning that you have to observe to know. But there are other things that are universal, being that, people like to talk about themselves. So engaging people in a way that you can get them to speak about themselves causes them to open up. But when you are the one just yakking away from start to finish and focusing all the spotlight on yourself, right? You're going to miss out on the opportunity to be able to connect.
I love the fact. First things first, I love the simplification and the analogy you use. It just makes it so easy. So before I speak to that, those that are just joining us, I'm with the mind guy. The man, the legend, the one, the only, Mr. Bankole Williams. He is the guru. I call him the guru. He doesn't know that I call him the guru. And one thing that I know that he has going for everything is his wealth of knowledge and the depth, which I honor greatly. For those that are just joining us, we're speaking to the role of the mind in winning over people win over persons, and how important it is that your mind is well primed for you to be able to win over men. Otherwise, you will struggle on the earth. We have so many skilled, educated, even well connected people who are struggling because they do not understand these rudimentary principles that are very effective to doing that. Usually, I give away a lot of free material, ebooks, and tomorrow I'm having a webinar speaking on leadership, speaking on finance, and speaking to relationship. So if you're on this call, you want to be part of it, my team are on the call. You have only two things you need to do. Number one, you must be following Mr. Bankole Williams. You must follow his page, and then you can follow my page. Then I want you to up into my DM. All I want you to say is the mind guy and drop your email address. The mind guy, and simple. The mind guy, drop your email address. Somebody would send you an email and you will join us and get some free stuff. So go into my DM, the mind guy, follow Mr. Bankole's page and follow this page. Now, I love the way that you spoke to the common ground. I remember I had an experience once where I had the privilege of meeting a very prominent HNI in this country. And I tell you this just so that it buttresses what you just said. I got into his office, Papa, I will never forget, and sitting in his what's it called, secretary's office on this very big marble or mahogany table, I can't remember, was a big book. And when I saw it, you know, the way the Lord of the Rings, every time anybody saw the ring, you know the way your eyes, but what was it? It was the Manchester United Opus sitting on his table. Now, I walk into this guy's office knowing and realizing that thanks to observation, I have found it. Immediately, he stretched out his hand to shake me. He had the Red Devil Ublu on. And all I just said to him was, "You're United supporter like me, sir." That was all. I can guarantee you, Bankole, that the next thing I hear is, we didn't even talk about why I came there. He was only interested in, we should go and watch a match together. We can fly in the morning. We can be back by evening and watch the game. I remember coming back to tell I said, I don't think I'm ready for that lifestyle. DSTV is still, by the time you start going to fly and watch games in the morning and evening, by the time you come, the DSTV would not, it won't match up. Now, the second thing that you said is a lot of people, and which I'm going to bring my next question, a lot of people tend to view things only from their selfish lens, if I'm allowed to use that. I don't know if it's an inherent human nature, as it were, but we all tend to look at things from our selfish lens, never from the lenses of the person on the other side. And I would say it is one of the reasons why people struggle and why relationships are struggling, marriages are struggling, because you're looking at everything from your perspective. The minute you're humble enough to look at it from the other person's perspective, things move. My next question. Now, knowing fully well that it's a selfish world out there, and most of these guys tend to have layers and layers of walls of defense. I think it was when I became a lot older and mature that I could understand why they do it. Because otherwise, their own lives would be a complete wreck as well. So these men tend to put all these layers around them, whether it's in form of systems, structures, human beings, just to be able to sieve between what is real and what is not. Oftentimes, I see people struggle with this because they feel that, oh, I've tried, this man doesn't, oh, I've tried, I can't even get close to observing this same person. Maybe there's this MD of the bank you want to see. You have to go through his chief of staff, go through his secretary, go through all these layers of individuals, and people complain. Is there any trick, as it were, up your sleeve that you'll be able to advise anybody who has found themselves in a state where they're struggling to get past the wall of defense?
Yeah, beautiful question. And I have a number of experiences in this regard. So I'll share one.
We both must.
A number of experiences. Different people who have met where there were walls of protection and everything, but I was able to break through the walls. See, every human being is an emotional being. Every human being. If you can touch their emotions, you can influence their decisions. I'll take that again. Every human being is an emotional being. That's what distinguishes us from machines, from artificial intelligence, all that. Right? When they discover a robot that has emotions, just know it is finished. Our unique selling proposition is our energy, is our emotions. So your ability to touch somebody's emotions can impact, can influence their decisions. Have you ever bought something before and then when the person that sold it to you left, you wondered, why did I even buy this thing? Right? It happens all the time. Let me tell you what happened. When the person was with you, they impacted on your emotions. And because they impacted on your emotions, it influenced your decisions. When they left, emotions left, logic came back. And logic now made you wonder, I don't really need this thing. Why did I
buy it?
So, so your ability to understand this principle and know specifically how you can impact on people's emotions, right, can ultimately determine the level and the degree of access that you have to them. So that is so critical. I'll give you an example. Coca-Cola. If you ever remember, Coke had this campaign called Share Coke with a Friend. Right? Yeah, that had people's names on it. I'm sure that there are people on this call who went to supermarkets, queued up just to find a bottle of Coke that had their name on it. Right? Now, the liquid content did not change, but the sale of Coca-Cola went up. Coke knows that their customers are emotional beings. So they know that people are particular about their names. Everybody loves. If you don't like your name, if you don't like the sound of your name, I'm sure you'd have changed it right now, right? But but for you to live with your name, you must like the sound and the sight of your name. So Coke knows that. You think they really care so much about you like that? No, they care about your money, and they know that you care about your name. So if we can show that we care about your name, then we can get your money. So the question is, what do these people who you want to access, what do they care for? And how can I add value to what it is that they care for? How can I show that I'm giving value and not that I want to receive or want to collect? Because these influential people are always surrounded by people who want to take from them. So you have to be able to pitch what you are offering in a way that will speak to what is. I'll tell you how I met my MD of Fidelity Bank and how I got Fidelity Bank to sponsor one of the conferences. At the time, I was doing conferences, Live Your Dreams Africa conferences across, Nigeria. How I got them to sponsor one of the events. I thought to myself, see, I'm a very, I have some very crazy, creative ways I do things, right? I'm a businessman, and you just have to really think about these things. Now I know that I want to be able to reach the MD. How can I reach him? Oh, I have to get his email address. I don't know his email, but I know the email of one staff in that organization. There are a series of permutations that you can put in place, and you will get the MD's email, so long as you know one staff's email, right? God knows how many times I've written to different people just using this formula. So if the email of one person is chris.omodiade at whatever organization, the MD's email may likely be his first name and last name. It's simple logic, right? It might even be his first name at that organization. I tried out the different permutations and I sent an email. Now, the most important part of an email, a lot of people do not know. People think that the body of the email is the most important part. People put the most important thing in an attachment. Whilst an attachment is good, right, I may never get to the attachment. There are layers I have to pass through before I get to the attachment, and you may have lost me. So the question is, what is the most important part of an email? The most important part of the subject. That's what determines whether you're going to open it. But people will now put a subject that shows that you want to collect. How does that make sense? Do you know how many other people out there, right, are trying to collect from that person that you want to that you want to gain access to. So you say sponsorship for XYZ. Do you know how many sponsorship requests get to that MD's emails or email? Do you know how many people are always seeking to? So you have to think of a way to add value. So I thought to myself, if I want them to sponsor, what value am I bringing to this organization? What is the need that the organization has that this my platform or whatever it is that I'm pitching can provide? All organizations either want to save money, they want to make more money, or they want to grow their brand or their market share. So I said to myself, let me do some research to find out what is value to the organization. And at the time, this particular organization prioritized their SME business. In fact, they used to do a lot of ads and projects on small and medium scale business. So I knew that that was a primary aspect, focal point in their business. So my subject was how to significantly boost the small and medium scale business for this organization, right? Knowing that that was value to the CEO, I sent that email. The MD replied me and copied 3 executive directors. The executive directors, and once the MD does that, everybody's on the edge. The executive in nothing. I didn't know. Okay, I tell you what, I noticed it was breaking. Yeah. Right, and that's how I was able to gain access, right, to this organization, and ultimately they sponsored this particular project. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying come correct. What does that mean? Find how you can add value, right, to what is important to that person, not what you think is important to you. Study them, observation, I said this before, to know what is important to them and see how you can add value. And that way you'll be able to have access.
It blows my mind that you're saying this, because sometimes it's until we align some of these things before people tend to understand its importance. Like you would notice every time you get a fraudulent email, the subject is what catches you. They understand that if the subject is like a hook, once they roll out that and they grab you, you're in. And you also spoke extensively as regards value, and I wrote about this in the book Gatekeepers, where I gave some biblical example and I referenced Esther in the Bible, and now Esther literally she puts herself in a position to just follow the leaning and the leading of the eunuch. She put herself, it was not at a point in time, it was everything the eunuch said, take a shower in camel milk or whatever it is so that your skin will be velvety. When it was time for her to go and meet the king, and she was expected to take one item, this man has been serving the king. He knows the king's, fetishes, and I'm sure would have said, what, go correct, like you said, and you will connect with this guy, because afterwards, nobody said what happened to the rest of the women. Esther just took the crown. I want you to speak to something. So I had a situation of some sort that kind of mirrors yours, where I was at an airport lounge once, and I noticed a particular gentleman of repute walk into that lounge. Now, you and I belong to a school where I know by the help of God, we have no issues walking up to individuals, speaking to them and making our pitch. I know you don't have that. I don't have that. We will do it 1,000,001 times, even in our sleep. So this gentleman comes into this airport lounge, and I know it's a golden opportunity that I cannot let go, because when we land, there will be a routine number of aides and the rest waiting in Lagos from Abuja. So I asked the lady in the lounge to offer this gentleman a cup of tea without speaking to him. She walks up to him with a tray and is ready to, and the man gives the look of, I didn't
order anything.
I didn't order anything. And at that point in time, she points to me, and that's my cue. Now, I have these few seconds to be able to make an impression, and I just told the man, I said, morning, sir, I know it's a very early start, You probably left home without a cup of tea. But more importantly, man, he looked at me and asked, like, what is in for you? And my only response to him was, I would only plead that you answer 3 questions from me and I'll let you have your peace. And the man wonders 3 questions for a cup of tea. Obviously, he can afford the tea, but I had piqued his interest at that point in time. And one of the questions I asked was, you are at this point where you rose to the top of your industry, you're well known in the country, you are behind a bank, you sit on numerous boards. If you are to turn back the hands of the clock, what would you do different? I can never forget the look on this man's face. He sips this tea and just told me, please, young man, have a seat. And that relationship is still there till this very day.
Wow.
Now, I want to ask you, for those individuals on the call who struggle, because I really want us to help them, who struggle when they find themselves in position. Some people, it's almost like a deer in front of headlights. It's freeze or flight. They don't understand what goes on. It's probably when the individual has left that they now say, oh, guess who I saw at the airport? Guess who I saw on the plane? He even wove and said hi. And I could have told him this. What happens to the brain? And maybe you can help us out. And what can we do to hack it? Where we find ourselves in a position where it is a golden opportunity. You've gone to church, you did 70 days fasting, you did 90 days of the word, and now God has sent the helper that you've been asking for, but you've now frozen in front of this helper. Help us out, sir.
Beautiful question. So, is whenever we perceive a threat, right? And for most people, walking up to somebody and getting to meet them is a potential threatful situation, right? And, it's the way the brain works. Once there is the perception of a threat, and the threat is the fear of rejection, for most people, that's it. Is this person going to embarrass me? Is this person going to reject me? So the threat is that fear of rejection, right? The body, the brain and the body go into survival mode. Now, in survival mode, what happens, right? In survival mode, you can either freeze, you run, you flee, or you hide, right? Which is what happens to people. They run away from that potential opportunity, calling it a threat. They freeze, they're in front of the person and, they can't see anything, right? And, they hide from that potential opportunity and everything. So that's really just explaining what happens on the inside of them that causes such a situation to occur. Now, when one finds, in fact, before you find yourself in those positions, the problem is people are trying to master what they have not in public, what they have not perfected privately. I'll take it again. People are attempting to master in public what they've not perfected privately. Now, what am I trying to say? If you have not predetermined, for instance, a possible, like you, for instance, you had 3 questions. I can imagine that those questions are not just questions that, well, even if you are able to create them on the spur of the moment, but I can imagine that you've premeditated on those kinds of questions, such that if such a potential opportunity shows up, you know the questions to ask. But people have those opportunities, and it is in that moment they are now trying to search the storehouse of their minds for what to say in that moment. So they are pre-rehearsing what is going to play out under pressure. Creativity and stress cannot happen simultaneously. I need to take that again. Creativity and stress cannot happen simultaneously. You are currently under stress, and you want to be able to come up with a creative question to ask, a creative thing to say that would make the person go, wow, sit down, we need to talk, right? Now, it's difficult in those situations if you have not predetermined, right? One day you are going to have this kind of opportunity that, Chris had. You're going to step into an elevator, and then the CEO of that organization is going to walk into that elevator. If you have not premeditated or predetermined the potential questions to be able to ask, or the thing to say to be able to establish a connection Where are you going to source that file from on the spot? Right? And it's just wisdom to be able to do these things. Right? There's a gentleman who when I was in Guarantee Trust Bank, see, after that experience, it changed my life. I said, it was a holiday jobber. This guy was still in school. He came for his internship in Guarantee Trust Bank. And he had just previously, so he had worked for a period, and then he traveled for a holiday, and then he bought a gift for the MD. Bought a gift for the MD. So he came to meet me because he was working under me. He came to meet me to say, that he wants to go see the MD. I said, hey, I don't understand how. I said, how is it that I'm going to see the MD? He said, that he bought him a gift. I said, how do you know the MD to even buy him a gift to know that you can give it to him? He said, that he knows the MD. I said, how do you know him? He said, one day he was in the elevator and then the MD walked into the elevator. Now, the default staff of that organization would be mute. You see, let me not see anything.
You move the wrong side of the elevator.
Let me not rub him up the wrong way or upset him. Right? That's what people used to do. But this gentleman engaged the MD. Right. So he greeted him. He said, good afternoon, sir. My name is Lade. Right. And, I'm a holiday jobber in the Human Resources Department. And I really would love to see myself in the future of this organization. Right. And I know that you have big dreams for this company. I'm just curious to know, where you see this organization going and what advice you would have for a young man like me so that I can fit perfectly in the culture of the organization to fulfill your dreams for this institution. The MD looked at him. He said,
who are you?
Do you understand?
Where are you from?
Do you understand? So you're not a full-time staff of this organization. He said, no, I'm just, doing a holiday job here, but I hope one day I'm going to have a full-time job here, and I just need to ensure that I'm positioned to fulfill the dreams I have for this organization. You know what the MD said? He said, you know what? Come to my office.
That's it.
And then they walked together to the office, and then they had a rich conversation. Holiday started just an intern. Intern. Wise guy traveled out of the country and came back and bought this guy a gift. Are you telling me that this MD will ever forget him? It's impossible. Right. So these are tips.
So let me ask this. It's so amazing you give this this example because it perfectly ties with the next thing that dropped in my spirit. Perfectly ties. But before I do that, those who are just joining us, you're welcome. It's Conversations with the CEO. That's me, by the way. And with the mind guy, the one, the only, Mr. Bankole Williams, drum roll. He's sharing with us unique perspective on the power and the importance of the mind when you want to win over persons of influence, individuals, human relationships. And usually what I do on these calls is that my team, I can see some of them, they are on ground to be able to share some amazing stuff with you. Tomorrow we have an amazing webinar, just a couple of hours to just rattle your theology, make sure you don't miss it. But the only way you can be part of it is I want you to be following Mr. Bankole's page, follow this page, go into my DM and just write the mind guy and your email. The mind guy and your email, somebody will send you something. Now, Mr. Bankole Williams, I'm going to say this now. I love the fact that you spoke to preparation, which unfortunately I noticed that it's a major problem on this side of the world. People don't prepare mentally and otherwise. People don't put themselves in positions to understand that the backstage is a place for preparation. The front is performance. We always try to do both performance and preparation on the stage. It can never work. I'm having a book launch in the next month, 30 days from now. I can't wait to see you there. And I know how much nitty gritty is going into the most minute part of the planning. Who is on the stage? Who comes on next? What's on the stage? What's the mood? What's the lighting like? What's the music going to be playing at the time? It is all these things that if you can apply in your life would work for you. You are so correct that the questions I asked were generic questions that my mind had already prepared, that if I meet a person of influence, that guy just happened to have just fit the bill, but I would never be so starstruck that my mind would not be able to fetch from the reservoirs to say, this is what you can say. And I also realized, Bankole, that it's also a function of the richness and the wealth of your knowledge base. So I tell people, the more exposed you are, the more you
Yeah.
read, the more you travel, the more you do things, it expands you. Now, I just said one word: travel. When I encourage people and I say save up to travel, some people misinterpret it, or they would through their own lenses to mean go and look at white people. They fail to understand that the role. Oh, it just froze. I hope Mr. Bankole. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can
Oh,
hear
good.
you.
They,
I can hear
okay,
you.
they fail to understand the role of the exposure you have on the world. You mentioned that this gentleman traveled and bought. From a brief explanation of what you've just given, I can tell that his background is such that he has a level of exposure. Now,
Yep.
a lot of Nigerians, unfortunately, are not at that point where they were built, because if you grew up in the UK, the US, you know that you are tutored. I have a 7 year old. He's being schooled in Lagos, Nigeria. And the number one rule is ask your questions to anybody. There is nobody that is too big. There's nobody that is too special that you cannot politely ask a question. Now, sir, if we have this background, don't you also think it's also playing a major role in holding people hostage or holding people in bondage? And how do we break it? What do I mean by this? One more thing. I realized that when we were growing up, my dad and possibly your parents would have said, don't talk to strangers.
Of
And
course.
we all grew up with that era saying, don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to strangers. I grew up with that. If you talk to strangers, you turn to yam, they carry you home, they fry you, they eat you. It's a wrap. So we grew up with that. Now we are all adults. Now we're in the world, as it were. Forgetting the fact that our minds have been conditioned to say, don't talk to stranger. Now your office sends you to this networking event where you're supposed to meet with potentials. And you get to this point where you cannot bring yourself to speak to a stranger, because why? Daddy and mommy at one point in time, I know this is our NLP and emotional intelligence economy, that they've conditioned our mind. How can we help people on this call conduct a 2 minutes deliverance for them to be able to break free from this mental stagnant state of where a lot of things are preconditioned them and is limiting them from winning over men?
Wonderful question. You see, we are all products of our past experiences. There are certain mindsets, and what is a mindset? Is a fixed mental disposition that predetermines.
Are you
I
in
love
my
it. I love it.
Go on, please.
That predetermines a person's interpretations of situations, right, and ultimately their outcomes. You are your life is a function of your predominant mindsets. So it is important to ask yourself, what are the mindsets I have about interacting with people? What are some of these limiting mindsets and beliefs that I've upheld? And you just gave an example. You said your parents told you don't talk to strangers. Now, it served you for a season. There was a motive. The reason for them doing it was for your preservation and for your protection. That was their intent. However, what then happens is that when we're children, our conscious faculties are not yet as developed. So we are more subconscious as children and less conscious. So a rational parent that has a rationale behind the statement is telling an irrational child, because the children have not developed rational faculties, do not talk to strangers. Now, that child unconsciously has imbibed that as a long-term way of interacting with people, a long-term rule, a mindset. Now, that mindset served them when they were kids. But the problem is, you grow up, you become an adult, your rational faculties start to develop, but they can only rationalize what has been invested in your subconscious mind. So they will only rationalize within the frame of what was invested in you by your parents when you were kids. What does that mean? The person ultimately now becomes a victim of what they have been told. So even as an adult, you can't explain why. For some interesting reason, you can't bring yourself to speak to someone who you do not know. It's an unconscious bias and an unconscious pattern. And I think the first thing is to uncover what those mindsets are. How can you deal with a problem that you have not even established as a problem, that you've not even identified? So I think the very first step is self-awareness. And see, one of the worst things to do is to lie to yourself, to say, I'm a confident person, I'm very confident. But you have palpitations that exist in your heart when you are in the presence of someone who you are not familiar with. That's feedback. Emotions are a feedback mechanism telling us where our unconscious minds have been. So when you feel a certain strong emotion in a seemingly simple situation, it's a simple situation, but you are feeling a strong emotion, it is feedback to you that concerning that matter at hand, there is a limiting belief there, right? And it is wisdom to be able to ask yourself, right, what limiting belief may exist here, right? And one of the things I advise people, document this thing, write this thing down, right? Seek help, read books that would help you break, those kinds of mindset, books that relate to that problem that you have identified. Attend courses, attend Chris's program tomorrow that would give you information, empower you with skills to be able to deal with that. Get a coach, get a therapist, right? There are many other things to talk about, but I think that these things are the simple ones. The first step, self-awareness, to be able to overcome this.
And you just I mean, this is the reason why organizations pay top dollar to you. This is the reason why you are one of the country's most sought after coaches, mind experts, because the way you effortlessly glide and ski, it is a beauty to behold. And like I said, I don't take it for granted. Whilst you were speaking to the fact about people, we're just tying up the loose ends before I let you go and have an amazing Friday evening. I was speaking to the fact that it is very important. And I remember the story of Bill Clinton when he would speak to the fact that when he was in school without mobile phones, he would walk around frat parties with a notepad in his jacket and a pen, and he'll be writing and taking down details of strangers. And when he was asked why, he would resort and tell them that because one day I'm going to be president of the United States of America, and you can imagine where the heights that these gentlemen have reached just because of their self-awareness. Now, finally, Mr. Bankole Williams, before I let you go, you've spoken extensively on so many different subject areas. And the major one that I want you to finalize and close the lead on has to do with what you ended in the last question about yourself. When I do trainings, and I'm sure you have your various tools that you use when you do your trainings, one of the exercises I engage in is I tell people, bring out a sheet of paper and write about yourself. And I am yet to find a single training where any individual has been able to finish an entire A4 and ask for more. I am yet to see one. Oftentimes, they will write after a few sentences and drop the pen, and you see them staring into the ceiling. I didn't say write about Chris. I said write about yourself. because a lot of people, and I don't know the stats, but I know that a huge chunk of people do not
Know
invest the time
themselves.
in knowing about themselves. So I want you to just, as we round off, just for a minute, speak to the audience about the importance. Let them understand how your success, your failure, and everything else that you desire or not desire is tied to self-awareness.
That this question require a bottle of wine and two glasses, man.
I'm sending it to your office on Monday.
Man, and that's the question, man. The heart of every success is premised and is hinged to one's ability to answer this question, right? And most people have never really spent time with themselves. And that's the truth. Most people spend time with activities, they spend time with places, they spend time with other people, they spend time with things, but they rarely spend time with themselves. I saw a study that was done, I think it was done at Harvard University, where they told people to spend time in a room alone with their thoughts. So this room was isolated such that you couldn't hear the sound of anything. Alone with their thoughts, or opt out of that exercise and get electric shock, right? A large,
People to the
yes,
shop.
a large percentage of the people after 15 minutes could not do that exercise alone with themselves, right? It just goes to tell you how a lot of us are unaware of ourselves. Now, to be aware of yourself is to be able to place your consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, and consciousness is really the essence of you, right? You are not this physical body, you are pure consciousness, right? To be able to place your consciousness on your insides. The question is, what is inside of you? What happens inside of you? To place your consciousness on your internal dialogue, that inner chatter that's always going on, that tape player that's always playing, to be able to become the observer of that inner dialogue that oftentimes may not even align with your desires. So if as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, which then suggests that what happens inside of us determines who we are and determines what we experience in this life, then it is important to become the master of the tape that's playing inside. Some people's tapes play without their permission, right? All those conversations in the head, you're not good enough, opportunities don't find you, all those kinds of things, all that inner chatter, right? We never introspect to notice what's happening there so that we can be the sole determinant of the tape that plays in the background of our minds, right? And if you can't take charge of that tape, then you can't take charge of your life. If you can't take charge of your life, then you predispose yourself to be a victim of circumstances and situations, right? So it is essential, it is critical. If you've never gone on that journey inwards, then please find people, experts, coaches who can help show you to you so that you can become a better master at being you.
I'm just going to increase the bottle of wine I'm going to send to you from 1 to 2 bottles, because that was just a beautiful, beautiful end to this conversation. I'll end on the note that I remember a lot of people tend to admire successful people and don't understand the work that goes into being successful. Bill Gates is known to do what is called a think week, where he isolates himself in a cabin in the woods and he has food brought to him. All he has is a yellow jotter, a pen, and some books. No tech. Now, this is the man that drives tech. That gave you tech. He goes to the forest, but please don't go to the forest if you're in Nigeria. he goes to the forest to go and think, reflect, and come. It is little wonder that these guys come up with the things they do. And I've studied the lives of the most successful individuals. Steve Jobs will go to the mountains in Nepal to meditate. I don't know where they draw from, but just know that whatever part of the spectrum you are, whether you're a Christian or otherwise, everything that you draw to manifest comes from meditation and comes from self-awareness. And that is fact. Now, you've been amazing, sir. I really want us to do this rodeo some other time again if I can get a hold of you. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate all that you do. And trust me, I am a great fan of your work. So everyone who's on the call, please follow his page. It's not for numbers. It is a fact that you will learn. There's so much gems of knowledge that drops on his page that blows me away. So follow, and you can do well to follow this page so that you can also be a beneficiary of the free webinar we're having tomorrow. And also you can get some free gifts from me. Mr. Bankole Williams, it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have had you. Our conversations with the CEO, the Lord bless you, the Lord prosper you, the Lord expand you, and the Lord ensure that this wealth of knowledge that He has given you will flow to the nations. It will not be limited within the geographical confines of our dear country, Nigeria. The angels of the Lord Himself assigned to you would ensure that He takes it up upon His wings and moves upon the nations. That what indeed He has invested in you, you will be wasted for the Master. You will die empty. He would ensure that every little thing that He has invested in you for you to transform this generation and touch your world will become a reality in the name of Jesus. Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my friend. I honor you.
Thank you. And
thank you so much.
Just final
Thank you
stuff,
to everyone who joined.
These guys, make sure you send that DM. The mind guy, right? Right. Because there's some people that are just joining mind guy to benefit from all the gifts that Chris has for you and show up at his webinar tomorrow. God bless you, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, guys. God bless you all. Enjoy your Friday evening.
Yeah, you too.
All right, my brother.